to officially start the show today, hello everybody. It's Thursday, June 25th, and we've got some Chapo for you. Obviously, big election results in New York City this week. We could talk about that. We could talk about the Prairie Land case, which we covered on the show recently. Those guys are getting 30 years plus for like fucking for receiving signs at their house. Terrible earthquake in Venezuela. But you know what, listeners? We're not going to do that today. There will be ample time next week to discuss New York City politics or whatever's going on in the moment. Because frankly, Felix and I feel that we are, as of late, a little too caught up in the present moment, a little too focused on prideful things, material things of the here and now. And we thought in today's episode, it might be a good opportunity to take a break from that and discuss a book. In fact, the book. The good book. Some say the best book ever written. That's right. We're talking the Bible today. We are going to be discussing the Bible. What does this book have to say to the modern world? And what lessons can be learned from some of its most famous stories and characters? And to help us with that, to guide us along the road to Damascus, is the host of the Bible Lore podcast, Hayden. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Really excited to be here. I mean, Chapo was a big part of my exodus from evangelical Christianity, so I guess I owe you guys one, and it's phenomenal to be here. I've been listening since nearly the beginning.
Well, let's get you back to the game. You've been out too long. You're like Liam Neeson and all his friends started Taken.
Yeah. Just bring me back in for one last job.
Yeah.
Well, close listeners of the show for a long time, Hayden, I'm sure I'll mark you among them, have long known that Felix has long had a fascination with King David, and we will certainly be talking about him today and his son. But just before we get into like some of the Bible stories that we've sort of curated for our listeners and for discussion today, Hayden, you mentioned that you were formerly an evangelical, but I was hoping you could, or maybe all of us, go through a little bit. What is your history with religion and the Bible?
Yeah, I was an evangelical. I grew up in the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church, so we did speaking in tongues, slain in the spirit. They come up and touch you on the head, and you're expected to like fall backwards, completely limp, and people catch you and stuff like that. It was, it's awful. It's just, it's so bizarre, and even when you're in it, it's such a freaky thing. But my parents were very involved in the church. I was always a bit of a turd. But after, I went through some hard times. My brother died when I was 18, and I decided, well, why don't I go be a missionary after like a couple of years of, getting drunk and whatever. So I became a missionary for a few years. So I've been very involved in this shit. I've been kind of up in it for a long time. After I came back from that in 2016, and I was like, wait a minute. The stuff in the Bible says that you shouldn't hate immigrants and poor people, but then, you come in the middle of like the Trump primary and then campaign, and that was extremely alienating. I found the dollop, I found you guys, and it got me out of it. So that's kind of the 2-second version of it.
Yeah, we've been creating heretics since 2016, and
exactly.
There's no stopping us now. Just to share a little background here. Obviously, another close listeners of the show will already have some knowledge of my history with religion through the incredibly fancy Upper West Side private school that I went to growing up, which was the Cathedral School of St. John the Divine, which was an Episcopal school, so slightly different than Pentecostalism. And, I would say I was not someone who was ever really sincerely religious, but I had my early imagination and schooling very much shaped by religious services, by the Bible, by the stories of Christianity and the Hebrew Bible. And I guess like earlier as a kid, I sort of rebelled against that because at a certain age, I was like, these are just stories. These are made up. These are just adults lying to you. And Hayden, I suppose you could say, as a child, I thought and spoke as a child, but now as a man, I have a slightly different perspective, which is to say, I don't believe in the Bible literally, but to say they're just stories and therefore have no meaning or truth into them is sort of a childish point of view, because all of the, works of literature, or let's be honest, movies and cartoons from my childhood that form the, I don't know, referential base of my worldview are in fact also just stories as well. But that is not to say that they are devoid of meaning or analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's your Will to Bill moment for on your road to Brooklyn. Yeah, absolutely. Felix, what was your upbringing like as far as like Torah stuff? Like you've mentioned your family's kind of somewhat secular, but I know like I'm always
I
interested in
think
how
somewhat is an understatement. So like on one side, my great grandfather, like he had to do like a bar mitzvah and everything when they were living, like Pale of settlement or whatever, what is now modern day Ukraine. And even in like, 1893, he was like, this is fucking gay. And he like, as like a 13-year-old boy, he like made this pledge that like, when I have a family, when I have kids, we're never doing this shit. It's so boring. This is so stupid. Like no one I know speaks Hebrew. This is fucking dumb. And so like that side of the family, like no one on that side of the family really did anything. No one got bar mitzvah. And then on the other side of the family, astute speakers of German, they will be able to intuit that my last name Biederman, it has two translations: petit bourgeois or just good man. This is because my dad's side were some type of like illiterate dirt farmers from someplace worse than Palo Settlement, and then sometime in like the 18th or 19th century, they were like, "Oh, okay, we've solved this problem of us not knowing how to read and like being stupid. We're going to go to Germany, and we're going to change our name to the German fake name that means just like good upper middle class guy." And so they did that for like 100 years. And we're like, oh shit, we forgot how to learn how to read and do anything. Whoops, we didn't become the warbirds. And then they came to America, and my grandmother, who's still alive, she was born in 1920. They lived in, I don't even know they had these in America in the 1920s, but like just like a basement apartment that didn't have a floor. It was just like dirt.
Wow.
And like they probably went to a temple or something, but like they were more committed to the cause of illiteracy. And that grandmother is like one of the most fervent atheists I have ever fucking met in my life. Like we used to do Passover every once in a while just because it was like, like her parents did it. But like literally at Passover, she would be like, oh, you should read this new Sam Harris book I read about how God's made up and how only fucking idiots believe in God. So I didn't get any of that. I went to a bunch of bar mitzvahs. I saw some of the dumbest fucking kids I know phonetically stumble their way through Hebrew, and I really thought like there is nothing to this. There is, if that kid's a man, you are off your ass. But I didn't really know anything about it or learn anything about it. Ironically, until I went to college, and for some weird fucking reason, I went to a Jesuit university, the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. And hey, those guys know how to fucking make it interesting. Well, yeah. When I read 2 Samuel for the first time, I was like, this is the coolest guy ever. And then, my professors were telling me, you missed the point by idolizing him.
Oh,
and I was like, well, I just started lying. I was like, fuck you. Do you know that everyone in my family is bar mitzvah and we're actually really Jewish? And you're just a goy telling me about my religion, even though this is like my first time ever reading any of it. But yeah, I come from a very non-religious family.
Yeah, and I'm from a pretty secular family as well. But growing up on the Upper West Side, I've been to so many fucking Passover seders and bar mitzvahs. I've lost track, and I want to begin there with the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, because I think, to me, like studying the Bible or learning about it, from a Christian perspective, it's like, okay, there's the book, and then there's like this quite significantly shorter sequel, the New Testament, and it's all about the New Testament. But most of the Bible is the Hebrew Bible. And I want to begin there because what strikes me about the Bible is that the Old and New Testaments are so radically different from each other in like what you're supposed to believe, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to act, and who God is in general. Like so much so that it's almost contradictory. Or actually, it directly basically is contradictory. That's the whole point. But I want to begin with the Old Testament. And Hayden, I was hoping you could just like give us some historical context for like the people and the world in which the Old Testament was written, like the late Bronze Age Levantine world.
Yeah, so this is one of the best parts of the Bible, to be honest. It's kind of why I fell in love with it after, reading it confessionally for so long. I encountered a book that kind of talked about some of these, like the historical context of it. And I was like, this is way more interesting than any of the shit that I learned where they're like, the Old Testament is just like, you're basically just looking for Jesus in it. Anything that can be attached, no matter how tenuously, to Jesus, it's all a story that points to Jesus. But like when you see it on its own terms, it's so much more interesting than that. Mostly what this is, so it starts as the kind of reformation of states after the Bronze Age collapse. So that happens in like the 12th century BCE. The whole system collapses. And it had been this highly globalized system. There's this shipwreck between the coast of Lebanon and Cyprus that like from like 1300. And it's loaded with shit from as far as like Afghanistan to Spain. There's just stuff, there's goods from this entire network, this huge globalized economy, and all of that shit collapsed for a variety of reasons. Migration, climate change, it was a bunch of things that came together to basically ruin this entire world. People start settling after that into like what we call now like what is known as like the Judean Highlands, the West Bank, stuff like that. Like you get a lot more people fleeing from these cities or migrating from other places into these locations to avoid all of the collapse. These cities are falling apart. Sometimes they're being burned down by their own people in revolts. There's no food. Like there are so many issues going on at once. It's very catastrophic. And a lot of the literature that comes out of the Iron Age, which is where most of the Bible, a lot of the Hebrew Bible is from, is reflective of that. In the same way that like Homer is reflective of this bygone era that they knew about, but which had disappeared. So that's when you really start getting state formation that allows for things like writing in Palestine in probably around the 9th century is when it really starts taking off. So like the 800s and 900s, or 900s less so, more 800s, you start getting that happening. And that's where like you get some of the first prophetic books, and they're kind of boring. So that takes up a lot of the Hebrew Bible. I love the Hebrew Bible. A lot of it can get quite repetitive and is not very fun to read as literature. So like,
yeah, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, those books are a real fucking snooze to get through.
Yeah. That is, so when I like did actually like, take theology classes in college, and they were like, all my theology professors were like amazing. They were very different. One was like this, actually like did grow up evangelical, and then like she realized she was a lesbian, and then like became like a liberal Catholic. But no, yeah, that was one of the most interesting things to me, was how like the classes I took about like the Old Testament it's this split of like 2 Samuel, which is just like Breaking Bad for the most part, except like the show Breaking Bad, if like Vince Gilligan was like, no, Skylar is a bitch. No, like Skylar sucks and Walt's awesome.
Yeah.
And then like 60% of the other stuff in there is just like a bunch of old Jewish guys being like, I don't know if you should have 2 pasta meals on the same day. Some of these fabrics don't feel good. They should be illegal.
Well, I love that about the Hebrew Bible, because like even within the Torah itself, it like the first 5 books, most scholars think there are at least 4 sources. So that's kind of what goes through it. There's the later one that tries to a little bit overwrite it, but because it's Jewish, they keep all the people they disagree with in the text as well. Like they might nudge it a little bit, but they're like, it's always like the Levites are the most important class. And then later writers will be like, the Levites aren't really very important in the temple. They kind of just do what we need them to do. They're pretty illiterate. Like that is one of the best parts about reading it, is that you get those differing, like, arguing perspectives. And Christians fuck it all up when they like basically say, no, there's only one right way to read all of this, and it's just like, no. It's all about old Jewish guys bitching at each other and whining about what the right, well, like none of this stuff was even implemented until so that's what it like. It eventually it's like a tour from Assyria, like the first empire in that region, which is, it's in northern Mesopotamia, so what was formerly called Sumer, and then it goes through like Babylon takes over from Assyria, and then the Persians wreck the shit out of Babylon and everyone else, and then Alexander and the Greeks come in, and you get all of these like it's this anthology that functions as this kind of like Forrest Gump of the most important people, but the Jews aren't really like a super important part of it. They're just kind of hanging out in the background, or being made like, exiles, and like the rich people end up in like the court of the Babylonian king and the Persian, that sort of thing. But like,
Yeah.
they keep all of that, and they continued that into the rabbinic period, where you're just like, no, we're keeping all of it. It's all these like the Talmud is just all these guys arguing over commentary and be like, actually, Rabbi so-and-so was completely wrong. The frog in Exodus was not one giant frog. It was actually, there's all
Yeah.
this shit like that. It's so
Well,
good.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point, because this is something that me and Andrew Hudson from
Yeah.
P1 have talked about a lot. This idea that like I wouldn't say like even Protestantism wholesale, because there's a billion different types of Protestants, but I would say the American evangelicism and as it is influenced by Calvinism,
Yeah.
there is this ethos of like, no, everything is all figured out.
Yes.
All the answers are here, which is a fucking insane thing to say about like, a book that literally it could just be like minutes of arguments from like a CPUSA meeting in 1941. But that, again, there are like Catholics who are like this, but for the most part, it does seem like Catholicism and certain interpretations of Judaism, though Judaism is becoming more and more Calvinist, of course.
Yeah.
Now, but and also Shia Islam, there is more of this idea of like, no, we can never really know any of this stuff in our terrestrial lives, and even like the scripture itself is we cannot fully comprehend it in these terrestrial bodies we have, and just by virtue of not being there, even if they do like literally believe it is the word of God, there is a degree of like mystery to it. And I think it's interesting that the in Christianity and Islam, the two sort of reactionary tendencies, takbirs in Islam and Calvinist influenced Protestants in Christianity, they both have this central idea of like, okay, you don't need a bunch of fucking stupid academics to tell you what this incredibly complex book that was written over the course of like thousands of years means. You have a personal relationship with God, and what that means is you are David. Meaning that like if there is a woman in your town who you think is a whore, kill her.
Yeah.
You have a personal covenant with God. Nothing else matters. There should be as few middlemen between you and that as possible, because you understand it. You're perfect. How do we know you're perfect? Because you're this thing.
Right. It really is like they ruin the Bible. Because to me, all of that complexity is best exemplified. For a long time, Ecclesiastes, which is called Kohelet in the Hebrew, it was one of my favorite books, and I didn't understand how people could have such certainty, and that was kind of what started to crack for me. And like recently, I've just realized that Job is the literary masterpiece of the Bible,
Yes,
because it
definitely.
deals with all of those exact issues in these beautiful, lengthy, and very difficult poetic renderings. And you get like Job has his entire family killed because God makes a bet with one of his main dudes who doesn't even get a name. He's just called the adversary, the Satan, Ha-Satan. He's just one of like presumably one of God's main guys, like in his divine council, one of the other main gods. And this is, before or around the time of like a more monolatrous, Yahweh only is worthy of worship sort of period when they're trying to get rid of worship of other gods. It kind of deals with a lot of that. Job has all of this happen to him. He has his three friends that essentially give him the answers that you will still get to this day from pastors, from theologians, from the annoying people in your life. I mean, a serious man really does it well. The kind of different answers that you get.
Consider the
And
parking lot.
exactly. And it comes to this point where like, and then there are questions about whether it's even a literary unity, because right before God speaks, this guy Elihu just shows up out of nowhere. He's never mentioned in the prologue. Everyone else gets mentioned. He's never mentioned before or again. And he starts showing up like a Looney Tunes character and is like, actually, you're all wrong. And here's what God's actually like. And he starts to even say stuff that starts to mirror what God is about to say afterwards. But then he says, but God will never answer you because you don't deserve it, and blah, blah, blah. Immediately after that, God shows up and does speak and gives him an answer. And it's even more confusing than anything. He shows up, a thunderstorm out of a whirlwind, and it's not helpful. It's just like, yeah, I'm huge. I am like, he compares himself to Leviathan, the great sea monster of chaos that backgrounds a lot of the mythology of the Bible and of the ancient Near East, and even of like that mythology shows up in like Homer and Hesiod. Like the ancient Near Eastern chaos motif went a long way. It makes it all the way to India. It's part of this big shared cosmology that's really, I find, extremely fascinating. But at the end of Job, God's like, I'm kind of like this giant chaos monster. You never know I can kind of do whatever I want. I have all these other responsibilities, and you don't really matter to me that like,
It's sort of like when Job says, "Is like, how could you do all this to me? Like, you're
yeah,
the number one guy. You're in charge of everything." And I think God's response is, as like a literary character, is almost saying to Job and the rest of humanity is like, "Hey, don't look at me. I'm not. I'm no
yeah.
more in control of this shit than the rest of you are."
Yeah, there's certainly like an element of that, and people miss that satire. And then at the end, like right after that, we don't really know what Job says because all of this book is written in this archaizing, like it basically is written like a fairy tale. It starts off with long ago in the land of Uz, like it's given this distant, antiquated story. A lot of it reaches very deep into the depths of Aramaic and Hebrew to find words. Like it's again, it's like something like Moby Dick. I really do think it is that level of impressive literarily, but it becomes very difficult to understand, and that might be part of the point at the very end, because we don't know even exactly how Job responds to all of this. Like it says, "I repent in dust and ashes," or something like that, but it could mean something like, I'm just going to sit here wallowing in the dust and ashes because I didn't get really an answer. But the answers after God's speech are so terse, so short that it's very hard. And then God says, all of your friends said nothing right about me. They were all wrong. All of these theological answers that you get from priests, from theologians, from these learned people who give you all the advice that is in the Bible, like in these older books of the Bible, that's all wrong. Job's the only one who said anything right about me. He says that. and then like he gives him a bunch of extra stuff, and that's the end of the story. Like it's just so much more interesting than what you usually see it portrayed as.
Well, Hayden, this actually gets to something that I wanted to discuss about the Old Testament, because if you consider the God of the Old Testament as a kind of a literary figure,
Yeah.
the thing that is so stark to me about some of the most famous stories of the Old Testament, Job is a whole book, but I'm thinking also of the story of Abraham and Isaac as well, as it seems a lot of it of people's relationship with God or God's relationship to people is that he is consciously fucking with people.
Yes.
Like he's constantly, it's like a girlfriend that like has tests where she sets you up to fail. I'm of course not speaking from personal experience here, but but like what are we to make of like the figure of God in the Old Testament as someone who's like, yeah, I'm gonna need you to kill your son, and then just
Yeah.
being like psych, and then like, or Job being like, hey, I'll pretty much ruin this guy's life on a bet, on a lark, and then basically bedevil him with my lack of a response or answers to any of it.
I think so. The Abraham stories, especially, and some of the stuff in Genesis, is really, really fascinating because there's a great book by the scholar John Anderson, called Jacob and the Divine Trickster, and it's all about how, especially the Jacob cycle, so these patriarchal stories are often repetitive. Again, it's folk narratives. It's like Homer, where you'll just see like the same guy, like the same stories and motifs repeated. So like in the patriarchal narratives, the most boring one is it's always like, and Abraham or whatever went to town, to a foreign city, and he told the king that his wife was his sister. And then the king tries to marry his sister because he said it was his sister. And then his life gets worse because God's cursing him because he's married or trying to marry a woman who's already married. And you're just like, what is the fucking point of this and it's repeated like 3 times. It becomes like the basis for the Book of Esther. Like the Book of Esther is a long play on that motif. And that's really interesting. But Jacob especially is the guy who's like, God and him are in cahoots to trick everybody, right? He steals his brother's blessing with God's blessing. So it's like, why would you give it to Esau, but then give it, like, God's plans are not always very clear. And I think that's part of it, but that becomes like sort of central. And it's very similar to how Zeus is portrayed, right? He can be tricked, like he gets tricked by Prometheus, probably in the original version of the myth that Hesiod recounts. And that's the same, like God gets wrestled by Jacob, but then someone also comes in there and says, well, it's an angel of Yahweh. But he's also referenced directly as God in the narrative. So it's kind of unclear. And so that's what you see a lot of this in a lot of these stories. In the case of the child sacrifice of Isaac, that's especially relevant to the period that they're in. So these stories are probably taking shape in the late Assyrian period. So Nineveh, you've got like all of these brutal kings. Ashurbanipal, he's just they are. It's one of the most evil empires in like a long list.
Famous for basically how shall I put this? Using spears to create like a stack of like baby kebabs thrown off city walls, like catch infants thrown off a city wall on a spike on a spear, and the person with the most infants on their fucking shaft would get a prize from him or something like that.
Yeah, and they deported like 3 million people, just wrecked these states if they rebelled at all. It was so brutal, and that's probably part of why it fell, and something that the Persians finally figured out. Like, you don't really need to do that unless it's sort of a last. Don't go in there and just burn everything down and kill everybody. But during that same period, there is this practice of child sacrifice. It's a very different time, and that's hard to understand. It seems to especially come from probably Phoenicia on the Lebanese coast, and that's how you end up. The Phoenicians colonized their like these trading cultures tended to be the ones who colonized a lot more. So the Greeks obviously have a lot of colonies, and the Phoenicians also have a lot of colonies. So that's how you end up with like a lot of Roman propaganda about like the Carthaginians are all sacrificing all their kids, and it gets really blown out of proportion, but it was a real practice. And that's some scholars have theorized that the original version of the Abraham and Isaac story, like at the end of the story, Isaac's not mentioned as coming down the hill with Abraham. He's not there. And that's really like a dark thing to consider, is that he shows up later, but there may have been a different version of the tale that ended with his killing. And you do see, like, they don't always even mention it. Like there's a story in Judges of Jephthah's daughter, and it's playing on this again folk motif. So it's not a real story, but it ends with her being sacrificed because her father makes an irrational bet. He basically says, if I win this battle, I'll just give God I'll kill whatever comes out of the house first. And lo and behold, it's a very famous, like, and commonly repeated story throughout these cultures. But all that to say, like, they have found what they call tophets, what are referred to in the Bible as tophets through archaeology, in a lot of these Phoenician settlements. And they are jars with children's remains in them, and often animal remains as well, buried in these little graveyard plots throughout the Mediterranean. And in a variety of languages, the inscriptions are often very formulaic. It says something like, for Zeus, for Jupiter, for Baal, a Molech sacrifice. And that becomes this, eventually gets warped into this god of child sacrifice by later writers in the Hebrew Bible who are embarrassed by this. But it was a real practice where you would give the firstborn or give a child over as part of like a covenant with God to get better crops, to see a blessing of some kind. It's trying to get divine favor. And you see this, like, even in the earliest version, the oldest, so the laws in the Torah are repeated. Again, so much stuff gets repeated. And part of this, they found, like, the earliest text looks a lot like the Code of Hammurabi. Now, it's not from the period of Hammurabi. It's probably from 1,000 years later, but this text became very influential among scribal classes. Nobody actually used them as laws until the Jews did in the 2nd century, which was a crazy decision to make. But they have all these, like, scribal propagandistic laws that they have. Like, look, we have a law code. Well, in Exodus, the part that says that you are to give over your firstborn child does not contain a clause like later layers of the Torah do that say, but you can give a different animal or you can give them to the priesthood. Like, they deal with this in a few different ways. No, it says all of your firstborn sons, the firstborn of your sheep, they are not differentiated in this Exodus passage, which is, again, it's very dark to think about, but that may reflect the real, like, a real practice of sometimes sacrifice, like making that votive offering to your God.
I mean, obviously, by the standards of contemporary morality, things like child sacrifice are very much frowned upon. But, like, if you live in a context of, like, where everyone is basically perpetually teetering on the edge of famine,
infant
disease,
mortality
oblivion,
is super high.
Yeah. And, like, you could do this one weird trick that would save everyone with a bountiful harvest. You might have a different idea, but this gets right into another thing I wanted to talk about, the Old Testament, and some of the more tedious parts of it. Is obviously, like, in the modern practice of Judaism, there is, Reform, conservative, Orthodox, and then, like, the Hasidic sects, and there's sort of a spectrum of, like, how seriously do you take this? Correct answer, they're all capping. Because basically, if you are not sacrificing basically all the time, you're not a real Jew. Because, like, so much of the actual practice of it is, like, how many pigeons do you have to sacrifice of a given week? And the answer is more pigeons than you got, buddy. Like, you are constantly having to make burnt offerings and animals, and the turtle doves, the pigeon things. That was essentially a concession to poor people who didn't have, like, lambs and cattle to slaughter. But, like, basically, like, if you have a skin, if you get a rash,
if you have, like, vitiligo, you're a leper.
If you have a skin condition, make those offerings. You're a woman who's just given birth, make an offering. Masturbation, that's two pigeons right on the on the altar, and it's very specific about how actually the priest would have to like basically wring off the head of the pigeon, pluck its feathers, and then kind of rip it apart, but not totally in two, and throw it on a wood burning fire. So like
Yeah.
just the sheer number of animal sacrifices you have to do all the time to be in good standing with God is a very like a jarring and weird thing to me about the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, I mean, David, the sacrifice that he's said to make and that Solomon makes for like the temple when they build that in at the beginning of Kings, it is like astronomical. They're like they slaughtered like 10,000 oxen or something. You're like, holy fuck! Like, I had a great conversation with a wonderful scholar. There's a really cool episode that I did with the scholar Eric Harvey out of Stanford, and he wrote this great little primer book for Cambridge Elements or something, one of those kind of imprints about like because of how alien the animal sacrifice is, you kind of miss what the real point of it is, which is that like this is somewhat like a mythological justification for essentially the tax system and for the king's place at the top of it, that you're supposed to give over to him lots of your good stuff, and you know, because he's God's emissary on the earth. In the Psalms, there are even some of these older Psalms that Christians use to say that it's like, oh, it's the Son of God. It's about the Son of God. It's about Jesus. No, it's about the kings. The kings are like it's a palace and temple complex. There's no.
It's sort of initiating people at a very basic level into the idea that like, hey, there's your stuff, but like don't count it too soon, right?
Exactly.
Like, a good chunk of that stuff, it's for someone else, not you.
And you're going to be toiling over it.
Yeah.
And it's going to suck. Like the curse in the Adam and Eve story is just, you're going to be doing, it's going to be really hard to work the land. It's going to fucking suck. And the reason Judaism becomes different is that they lose that king status, and you need something else, so that the priests kind of take over that role in a much bigger way. Like you see that sometimes in like Egypt or different places, the priestly classes will make these political plays to like further their influence. And that becomes like with the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, that becomes the example, like the peak example. Some of the people don't even want to go back to having a king. They do, like even when the priests sort of take over, they still, weirdly enough, it just kind of slots back right into that same political system. But that's the part that's really interesting, is like when you look at the creation of humanity in so many of these myths, including the Adam and Eve story and so much of the Bible, it is again all about kind of, don't forget there's a couple different classes of people and the standards for them are very different, and you're going to have to give over some of your stuff to make sure it all keeps going okay.
Well, I think I can just do the first character that we wanted to talk about today, which is Felix's boy, King David.
Yes.
So Felix, why don't we begin with you? Like, what is it about David as a character? What aspects of his story that like speak to you so deeply?
It has been a while since I like actually, took a theology class and had to seriously read it. But I go back to it a lot because I remember, I was not against taking those classes. I was open-minded to it, but I was blown away by how funny I found it almost immediately. Because the first thing that hooks me in King David's story, besides the fact that his come up is that he is the guy at the party who brings out an acoustic guitar.
Yes.
Which is like, normally that would, people would politely tell you to stop. But for some reason with David, it's just like, he just goes from strength to strength to strength after this.
Yeah.
But, it has been a while, but there's one part where it is a battle with the Philistines that he wins. And I think it might be the one where he's like, okay, we got to get like 40,000 of these foreskins so I can fuck this girl.
Yeah.
And then all his guys are like, yes, sir. So after it, he's obviously like, Terrell Owens.
Yeah.
He is being a really sore winner.
Yeah.
Like he's dancing.
Hey.
High stepping into the end zone.
Hey,
yeah,
come on.
yeah.
I'm a Broncos fan. Come on.
so the version I read, he's basically naked and running through the streets of Israel and giving people raisins, which like things were so bad back then. That's like candy.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest treat you could. Like Willy Wonka is the guy who makes the most raisins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his dick is swinging in the wind, and he's just like giving raisins and shit to everyone. And then the king's Saul's daughter, sort of sarcastically goes, because she's, you know, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
He came to my dad's house and played a liar, and now he's like a field marshal.
Yeah.
He's going to take everything I have. And so she goes, oh, how great it must be for the people of Israel to see their leader parading through the streets naked, handing out like treats, basically. And then the very next sentence is, she would go on to beget no children and die.
Yeah.
And it's like, which is like how Dan Quinn tells the story. Like everyone who's mean to him is just like, oh yeah, they never accomplished anything after that. But the story I wanted to talk about is, I think, the greatest fucking story in the entire Torah. The David, Bathsheba, Uriah love triangle.
Yeah.
It's not really a love triangle. It's just David being awful. So David sees Bathsheba bathing, and he's like, holy shit. I've gotten a lot of pussy in my day, but that is like, dang, I would do anything for that. And then he's like, oh, she's married to my best friend, like my best friend, the guy who's been riding with me this entire time. He probably cut off like half of those foreskins at one time. He was there naked with me, dancing in the streets. He was telling off that fucking asshole fucking daughter of Saul with me.
Yeah, Uriah's in the streets with a bag of candy, handing out to all the different Israelite outlaws, and like they're just doing the ancient version of food reviews right on the spot.
Yeah. They're almost like the Sons of Anarchy. Like they're fucking everything up.
Yes.
They put on this one like parade every year. And
Yes.
It's like, they're awesome. But
they do a charity bike ride for kids with leukemia or something.
Charity chariot ride right through the city, just running over people.
Yeah. So he's like, well, this guy has literally, like, this is my do or die. And I probably have 70,000 concubines, but I really want to do this. So he puts Uriah on the front lines of a battle that he is sure to die in. Like, it is guaranteed, and he does. And Uriah's gone. And pretty much, Uriah gets his shit blown clean off. Like, they don't even
off.
Yeah, they don't. Someone like had a firearm.
Yes.
Someone like, he was red misted, and David goes to Bathsheba and is like, "Hey, I heard about what happened. You need someone to have sex with. I'm here." And he fucks Bathsheba, and God, who like David has been able to accomplish all these things because he has a personal covenant with God that is never broken. That is the thing that is supposed to differentiate him between everyone who comes before and after, is that he never breaks that covenant. Even Solomon, there are some texts that accuse Solomon of at least like tolerating worship of other gods.
I will get to that in my section, Felix.
But
there's a cautionary tale there. Yeah.
And that's a good lesson. Like, if you don't ever fucking talk to anyone of a different religion, it's bad. But anywho, God is like, David, in case you forgot, you didn't like kill that big ass dude. David, it's kind of like Friday. It's like he's squaring up with him. John Witherspoon is like, we didn't need guns back in my day. And the point is supposed to be that they're having a fist fight. But David kills him with a rock, which is like what Craig does to fucking Debo. It's like, no, you assaulted him with a brick. He was kicking your ass before.
Yeah.
So Craig David is like, nah, fuck you, dude. I did all this shit because I'm awesome. You were there, but like, you know, the fuck you. I want to get it wet, dude. Well, why don't you fuck off? And God is like, no, you don't understand. Like, you keep fucking these things up. You keep being this huge asshole. I'm going to get you for this one. You knock this bitch up. her kid is going to die the second it's born. And David's like, wait. I'm sorry. Take back. And God's like, no, Uriah is dead. Like, you did it already. I can't, like, you're fucked, buddy. And so the entire term of the pregnancy, David is wailing and crying like every night, praying to God. The night before Bathsheba is supposed to give birth, he is just like on his hands and knees, like pleading and screaming and crying. And then finally it happens. The day comes. Bathsheba gives birth and the baby just instantly dies. And Bathsheba is devastated. Like, her life is ruined. And David, he just stops crying and he's like, well, I guess he told me that was what was going to happen. And I guess it did. Nothing to do now.
Well, and have another kid immediately.
Yeah. Bathsheba's life has been completely ruined. And David is just like, well, lesson learned.
Yeah.
I guess I won't do that again several hundred times. It's
amazing.
Is Bathsheba even mentioned after that?
Oh,
is that
she
just
is
another woman who.
So she comes back at the end, and this is one of the interesting parts, is that like Bathsheba is this favored character at that point. Like David, there's this whole conversation with God. She's on the inside. By the end of David's life, though, Solomon, who's their like kind of replacement baby for the one that dies, is not the heir apparent. And so there's this entire like succession crisis, quote unquote, where Bathsheba basically helps Solomon to seize the throne. Like, he kind of comes in and usurps it from his brothers. And it's this whole like, and it very much mirrors like David killing all of Saul's family as like a sacrifice. Like, he brutalizes them. And that's kind of like, you've gotten on to a lot of the interesting parts of this story, which is that like, it's very folkloric. So the way it's situated in the Bible, Samuel comes between like Joshua, Judges, and Kings. So Kings is like kind of based on probably real Kings lists from the period, but they add in all these theological concerns about, the point of like, it's what scholars call like the Deuteronomistic history. It's very similar to Deuteronomy, only one temple. It's very concerns of very specific kinds, very specific language that they use in a lot of it. Most of that's not in Samuel. It's in Joshua. It's in Judges. It's in Kings, which is right after. It's in Deuteronomy, obviously. It's not really in Samuel, which are these weird folk stories that we don't really know, like, who wrote them. I've seen scholars argue that these were originally like satirical writings from like the North making fun of David. And then they add the stuff about like, oh, and he played the lute for Saul and all of that. But like even like the pictures of Saul, he's not nearly as bad as David. Like his one like big crime that he commits is not genociding the people of Amalek and like or and I think a couple of other towns. He won't like be God's hatchet man to like brutalize and slaughter all of these people. And so the blessings removed from him. David does way worse shit, but God makes this covenant to make him like his number one guy and his line will last forever. But he's also still a piece of shit. And a lot of this very much feels like, court tales. It's very like the Joseph story is similar. It's all this entertaining intrigue. But like the story with Uriah and Bathsheba is especially weird because of how much it's tied into Solomon's ascension to the throne. And I've seen it argued that parts of these are redactional layers that essentially that are dealing with some of the complexities of it. So Solomon, if he's the son of Uriah, for example, that becomes a big problem. Or if there's any plausible case that he could be a bastard, Uriah's son from before. So it goes to great lengths to be like, and Uriah definitely didn't sleep with Bathsheba. And then someone else puts a big punctuation on it that's like, oh, and the baby definitely died. It's definitely not
definitely
Solomon.
Dead. Yeah,
his baby's dead. It's not the same baby. It's a completely different baby. And so there's like, it goes to great lengths to like tell you like this is definitely not Solomon is very legitimate. When he comes and steals the throne from his brother, half brothers, that's all good. God was totally sanctioning it. It's very bizarre to read it like and see it through that lens, because that lines up a whole lot better with David as he's portrayed in the rest of the story. A lot of the rest of the story, being this essentially warlord and terrorist who goes around and just murders people, oftentimes for very petty things, to like steal their cattle, to like they're rustlers, like they're very much like a Glanton gang type.
Yeah.
And he loses the covenant because he refuses to go full Netanyahu on like a couple fucking villages. Like,
Yes.
Well, yeah, David is Tony Soprano. That was like my first thought when I read this story. It was insane, and just a capstone on it, because I had never heard that interpretation of it. That's incredibly interesting, and it does like, it's funny in the way that like Canterbury Tales is funny.
Yes,
and I had never even considered that as an interpretation. That's incredibly interesting. But just the capstone on this for Solomon's ascension, Solomon does the opposite of bringing the guitar to the party. He does some Diddy shit. When David is on his deathbed, he's like, "Hey, I got like a 19-year-old for you to fuck."
Yeah, that story is especially. It's the fact that they bring this girl to him, and it's like Sons of Anarchy, when the guy can't, like, they're worried that you can't ride the motorcycle anymore, and so you can't be part of the gang. It's like, if you can't fuck this teenager, you're out, man. It's fucking over.
It was Jax who like has to like dope up Ron Perlman's hands. Yes. The same thing. They're like, it's your son has to bring in a teenage girl to just be like, "Dad, we're gonna get this done, man.
we got to keep this going, man. We're failing."
It's family. Well, hey, this goes. I mean, we're following like perfect chronological order here, because I wanted to talk about Solomon.
Yeah,
a guy who the only guy that got more pussy than his dad.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly,
Solomon, famously.
And it's so funny because he's immediately like, it's like he becomes king, and apparently he's just got these incredible diplomatic skills. So suddenly he's got like Pharaoh's daughter as a wife. He's marrying to all of the big political dynasties, and it's this very like, we're as important as those guys too. We're just as big as the Assyrian, like, and none of that's like, obviously none of that's true. Like, but it was a tiny kingdom that didn't matter.
It's a tiny kingdom that didn't matter. But if your king has like so many hoes, like he's got more hoes and they're all foreign.
He's putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers.
Yeah, one king's 11. It says here, but King. This is from the King James version. But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of the Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. So, like, if you're slaying the baddies from all of these surrounding kingdoms, in a way, that's like your one own small kingdom can be a big player on the big stage. And before we get into what I talk about with Solomon,
Hayden, as you put it out, that Israel was just this minor player. Like, to put it in sports terms, they were like a free agent kicker in the NFL.
Yes, that's exactly it.
They're just getting tossed around from team to team to team, different captivity rulers. Like, they have to uncircumcise themselves, some of them at some point. Like, that's how fucked up they're getting. But what Solomon does, it's basically like if the prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago fucked Donald Trump, Emmanuel Macron, Netanyahu.
Yes.
All this. And everyone's like, this country has like 1,000 people. Like, why do they have a nuclear triad now? And it's like, his dick is just that good. Like, he fucked Trump, he fucked Biden.
His circumcised penis is really that good. The funniest. So you mentioned, before we get on to Solomon, you mentioned like they like are reversing their circumcisions, and this is something that I'll eventually get into. I don't remember. I think it's the Bar Kokhba revolt. So way further, you get Jerusalem's destroyed, and you get this second Jewish revolt that's less famous, but it happens again, like 50 years after the 70 CE, like Titus and his father. Like there's before, like there is this second revolt because there's this other messianic movement that is trying to get past it. Simon Bar Kokhba, it's very famous for Jews. Christians don't know anything about it. But they're like, so after the destruction, a lot of these guys do start stretching their shit out so that they can fit in at like the
bathhouse.
The Roman bathhouses and to be involved in polite society. Well, these motherfuckers come in, and apparently there's like documentation. I think it's this one where they make some of them get circumcised again, like research, like Tony. What's his Tony Doka? It's like it's like, oh man.
Just so they can go to Equinox.
Yeah.
But like, so we talked about David. Like, this is when the kingdom of Israel was still a kingdom. It had kings.
Yeah.
So could you give us like just put on the timeline here, like what the historical context is for David and Solomon and the great Israelite kings?
So they barely are known at all. So the capital you get there. It's the story of two kingdoms, really. The kingdom based out of Samaria in the north, that's Israel, and the kingdom based in the south out of Jerusalem, that's Judah. It becomes like eventually over time that becomes Judea, and that's where the term for Jews comes from. And Samaritans come from Samaria, like that's basically what it is. The kingdoms are not actually probably related much at all at first. Israel is named after El, not Yahweh. So the epithet in the name, it's Israel, like God. El fights for us specifically. One of the strands of the Torah, and one of the earliest ones, is really emphasized on reminding you that El and Yahweh are the same guy. Remember, these are the same God. But what seems to have happened instead is that El was kind of often the head of the pantheon, like a Zeus or a Kronos or Marduk, or any of these other gods before them. But like a lot of those gods, like Kronos and like some of the other ones, they get usurped by, and even El in like Ugarit, Baal and these storm gods become much more politically salient. They are these combat gods that are very useful for political propaganda of saying we can come and wreck your shit. And so you still get these vestiges of the separation between the difference between El and Yahweh throughout the earliest parts of the Bible. Deuteronomy 32 famously says that, and they change this. They even, like the Masoretic text that Jews use changes this, but it says that El apportions the nations their gods, and Yahweh is the God of Israel, not the God of the whole world. Like that's in Deuteronomy 32 still. And for a long time, scholars posited that the reading in the old Greek translation, the Septuagint, was older because it preserves that. And the later texts seem to say instead that he gives Israel to itself, like he gives himself an inheritance of Israel, but he's also the God. Like they change it and make it about like the sons of Jacob instead of the sons of God. And so there is this recognition. El used to be the top of the pantheon, and Yahweh was like a top level God, but he wasn't number one over all the earth. He was the patron God.
El here referring to Elohim.
So you can be called El. El is just a generic name for like the high God, Elu. Like that's, I think Allah may be related. I don't know as much about that, but he was a very common god as the top of the pantheon in these places. And storm gods were often on the second part. But around the end of the Bronze Age, you see these storm gods start to take over. Marduk, the Enuma Elish, which is very similar to parts of Genesis and deals with a lot, again, same thing, Leviathan. He kills Leviathan. That's the founding of the world. It's taming chaos. The kings are the ones who tame the chaos of what came before, right? It's a civilization epic, kind of. And so Yahweh makes his way onto the scene probably around the 9th or 10th century, around the time when a Solomon may have lived. Over time, Israel exerts a lot of hegemony over, or at least tries to, over Judah. They're the bigger kingdom. They're much more like they have better land. Like southern Palestine is famously not a particularly hospitable place. It doesn't have a lot of good places to grow. It has like the Shephelah, like parts of the southern part of it's not always very good. It's very limited what you can do with that. The southern part is just like south is just desert in Hebrew. It's Negev. Like that entire southern portion, you can't grow anything there. It's shitty land. So the north is almost always until the time of Herod the Great is almost always more important in the grand political scheme than the south, and it creates this sort of little brother relationship. The north, though, is destroyed by the Assyrians because they had in 722 BCE. So they were around for a couple hundred years, moved their capital to Samaria, then got their shit wrecked. A lot of their elites get deported. 100 years later, almost the exact same thing happens to the Judahites. They get caught between Egypt and Babylon. And they're probably being expected to pay tribute to both. And they think maybe Egypt will be the right call. And it's not. And they get destroyed too. Like they keep picking the wrong hegemon to like that's the problem. And they get their shit rocked, and a lot of their elites get deported.
I think they might be doing that right now as well.
And so that's when a lot of the older stuff, like there's a lot of later things in the Hebrew Bible. The book of Ruth is very late. It's very like, hey, maybe we shouldn't hate immigrants. Whereas like Ezra and Nehemiah are like, actually anything foreign is dirty. And you get like Esther is very late. Jonah, like they're Daniel's written like 400 years after the events that it describes, a lot of it. But a lot of this early stuff is reflecting that kind of kingdom when they had a kingdom. And it's discussing that. And the catastrophe of the end of that hangs heavily over the Hebrew Bible. That like the redactional layers are all pretty cognizant of the fact that this ends, like the story ends badly.
Well, to talk about Solomon as a character, first question I have here. Why is his temple so important?
So this is that fuzzy period before the beginning of when they had like probably recorded lists of kings. Like this is the beginning of state formation in reality. But it also creates just a perfect spot for these sort of founding figures like David and Solomon. And Solomon he builds the temple. Someone built a temple on Zion. We don't know really who built it. Jerusalem is much older than the Judahites moving in. It was a military outpost in a small city for like, I think it goes back about 1,000 years before the existence of Hebrew, and probably goes back further than that. Like a lot of these little spots like that on hills were important outposts for thousands of years, right? Like Tyre, the city in Lebanon. It's been there, I think, almost 10,000 years.
Currently being destroyed.
Destroyed by Israel,
by the way,
exactly, like modern Israel, which is why this stuff is so frustrating. But anyway, so Solomon needs to, they need a big founding figure. And David is you probably don't want to put that on David. I mean, Solomon's kind of also portrayed as a piece of shit. So, but whatever. I don't, that part of it never made sense to me. It's like David did all of this bad stuff. And it's like, well, you also say that about Solomon by the end of it too, but whatever.
Yeah, but his reign coincided with all this economic growth and diplomatic and trade relationships, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, there was a little bit of that. Assyria's getting back on their feet during that time, and they're going to be the big players, but nothing's really quite there yet. It's very idealized and very much something that, it's not an accurate picture, but he needs to be the one who builds the temple, because the temple is very important, especially after the temple gets destroyed by the Babylonians. But whether there's even a question of whether there was already a temple there when they settled the place. Because as people have pointed out, it's the top hill in that little region. Where else would you put a shrine to whatever god you're worshiping? Shalim is a moon god. So there may have been a shrine or even the temple, but it was for a completely different god before they moved in, before kind of the Bronze Age collapse and the refounding of all these civilizations.
Now, and it's the fabled third temple, the construction of which will essentially fulfill a prophecy, fulfill the
I don't know if you guys knew this, but there was just another red heifer born. So
Yes.
keep on red heifer watch. It's very exciting. We're so close once again.
Hayden, have you ever read Gore Vidal's book Julian about the
No.
Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate?
I need to. It's on my list.
It's a fantastic historical fiction. I love it, but there's a part in it. This is, based on fact. There's a part in it where Julian, after he has sort of attempted to repaganize by then in the 4th century AD or CE, a fully Christian Roman Empire, he has attempted to turn back the clock on that and make it.
He finds all this shit corny and bad and philosophically
he wants to worship.
indefensible.
He wants to worship Helios. He wants to worship the sun. And there's a part where he gets in with the rabbinical class of Jerusalem while he's visiting there, and he says to them, "Hey, like you guys have been wanting to rebuild this temple, right?" And they go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Bet." And he commits all the resources of the Roman state to rebuild the temple. In his mind, to rebuild it and give the lie to the entire ruse of Christianity.
Yeah.
Before that can happen, there's a fire. This did happen.
Yeah.
There is a fire that breaks out, and Vidal and Julian himself in the book speculate that it is the Christian priestly class that burns down what remained of it to prevent the third temple from being built, to sort of, meet the bet here that the religion promises.
Yeah. And I mean, Julian still, I love that period, and he's such a fascinating character, but he still makes the same fucking mistake we're making again today. These fucking Romans, everyone, they all go to attack Persia. Stop attacking Persia.
Yep.
Stop attacking. It won't work. It doesn't matter if you've read Herodotus and know that there's like a dam on the Euphrates. You're not that smart. I'm sorry. Do it better.
Hayden, right when the most recent Iran war, the most recent assault on the Persian Empire started, I saw a post from one of those like based Western civilization accounts, and they were like, "We should look to the past and like, how did the Roman Empire defeat Persia? We should really study that at this moment." And like, you're like, yeah, you fucking should study it. They never did.
Yeah, have you heard of fucking Crassus, man? Like one of the most famous. He was rich. He was powerful. He was like the guy. And he couldn't
Game of
do
Thrones
it.
shit to that guy.
He couldn't do it.
But okay, sorry, just a digression. To get to Solomon,
Yeah.
He's known as the wisest of all kings.
Yeah.
And like, there's sort of two elements to his story here that I want to talk about. The first is like the wisdom of Solomon, his famous the judgments of Solomon.
Yeah.
And then the second is the larger sort of cautionary tale in his story, the way it's described in the Bible. It's a cautionary tale about having too many hoes and having too many foreign hoes. That through them you sort of reintroduce or accept or sort of, begin to tolerate all forms of their various idolatries.
Right. Yeah, and so like the most famous one that you mentioned is the story of him, like the baby splitting sort of thing.
Yes.
And it says 2 whore women because good Lord, like this stuff, there's so many like these fucking whores. It's everywhere in the Bible. It's very, I don't know. It's like 2 whore women come to him. One of them says that the other one fell asleep on her own baby and killed it. And so she takes the other one's baby and says, "No, it's mine." And that's where the dispute comes from, is the one who says, "No, it was my baby. She stole it because she killed her own." And the other one saying basically, "Nuh-uh. That's not what happened. She's actually the one that's, blah, 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 blah." And basically Solomon is even portrayed as like a Columbo-like character in that
just one more thing.
it intuits to the reader just subtly that he already knows which one of these is the real mom. And so to demonstrate his knowledge of this and his wisdom, he says,
"Yeah, because it's his kid, probably." You probably fucked her. That's how.
Now that belongs in the Mishnah. That's definitely a good rabbinical treatise. That basically like it says, well, what if we just cut the baby in half? In fact, he's like tells his priest, like, just cut the baby in half and we'll figure out which one likes it. And obviously the one who actually is the mother is the one who says like, no, don't do that. It's fine. Let her have it. I would rather, and the other one says, nah, go ahead and split it. Let's make this happen. And Solomon's like, see, I'm so what? I figured this one out.
Hayden, this is what I want to talk about because yes, that story, the story of the cutting the baby in half, is like one of my favorite Bible stories as a kid because you're taught Solomon was the wisest of all kings, and then they tell you this story as proof of his wisdom. And as a kid, when I heard this story, I was like, "Damn, this guy's good. This guy's good. He's got it. He's got it. He figured out the perfect way of seeing through this ruse."
Yeah.
But as an adult considering this story now, I still like it, but I always think of the woman who's lying.
Yeah.
And when he says, let's cut this baby in half, and she's like, yeah, sure.
Fuck yeah.
So yeah, it sounds good to me. And it's just like, come on, that was the giveaway. And that wasn't like, it was having a woman that dumb, not having a king that smart.
It's so, like, some of these old stories are so goofy like that. Like the folkloric element, you're like, what? No, what the fuck? Like, and some of them are just so tedious too. Like that's fun because that one, as strange as it is, at least it's like kind of, I don't know, there's some suspense, I guess. Whereas like Chris pointed out when I had him on my show that like when you I swear some of these stories, they occur twice because someone was like, the first version of this is so fucking boring. Like I think Chris called it like Grandpa Simpson stories, where like when you first meet Saul, he's like, the story is just like he was a big guy that he like, and he saved some sheep and he went and it tells you all the details about whose sheep got lost, and you're just like, fuck, man, this sucks so much. Like when you're reading that as a kid, you're like, this is so, why are we doing this as a family every night of the week? I want to fucking kill myself. Like but then, and that's what, like when you finally get to a story like Solomon and these clear folk tales that are, a lot of them I think are written for entertainment. You're like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. This guy's got the goods. He's so fucking smart. And I think it's partially because the stories of Solomon's wisdom are so weak. Like they that like he doesn't become the philosopher in like well, kind of in the lore, he becomes the magician. Like he becomes just really good at figuring out how to use magic and ritual to achieve his ends. That is where you get like Solomonic magic. That is even in the time of Jesus. Those myths are starting to form, and that becomes super salient for like Kabbalah and a lot of this medieval Jewish and Christian
and the Freemasons too.
Yeah, I mean that's where it all comes from, which is very funny because you look at this, Lesser Key of Solomon, you get all of this stuff that's like, and then you go back to the story and you're like, now hold on a second, I don't like, he was pretty cool, he got a lot of pussy, but was it like come on, the baby's, it's pretty good.
There is like missing context in that story. They recently discovered, this was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that there was this character that we didn't know about before in Solomon's life, whose name was Boozy. And he was in this it was sort of like a gymnasium, but like this, before the Hellenic period, obviously, but it was called Planet Fitness, and he actually got ejected from Planet Fitness because he was screaming out to Solomon, "Come on, man, Solomon, don't cut the baby in half. Come on, man, don't do it."
The last thing I want to bring up about Solomon and the story of the baby, like you speak about the folkloric qualities to it, and this has just been on my mind recently because it's another book that I'm currently reading. And one of my favorite literary analyses of the story of Solomon and cutting the baby in half comes courtesy of Mark Twain in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which I'm reading now. One of my favorite parts, rereading it, is where Huck tells Jim, Jim and Huck argue over the story of Solomon. And it begins with Huck telling Jim about like the kings and lords of Europe and what's that like. And Jim says, that sounds pretty good. What do you get for being a king? And Huck goes, about $1,000 a week. but you can do whatever you want. And you mostly hang out in the harem. And he says, what's a harem? And then he starts talking. He's like, oh, He goes, the only king I know, Jim says, the only king I know is King Solomon. And no, I'm not going to do the period accurate
Thank you.
dialect,
Yeah,
nor am I
yeah.
going to read from it. But in it, Hook is trying to tell Jim that he's missed the point of Solomon and cutting the baby in half story, because Jim is getting very outraged about, why would you cut a baby in half? You can't even do anything with it once it's in two pieces. and Hook goes, he goes, Jim, you plain missed the point. And Jim goes, no, like, you missed the point. The point is deeper. There's a deeper point to this story, and it has to do with Solomon and his harem. And he said, Solomon is, if a guy has like about 3 million wives, or has children running around everywhere causing such a racket, he says a guy that only has 1 or 2 kids would never cut a kid in half because he knows its worth. But a guy with several million kids, what's one dead kid than another? So he said Solomon just didn't value a kid because he had so many of them. It didn't matter if you cut one of them in half.
Fuck, that's so good. I need to read it again. I read it probably last time when I was like 24 or 25, and I fucking loved it. Besides, like, the last third gets kind of whatever. But it's so good, and yeah, that's amazing. And that reminds me, like, genuinely of how a lot of rabbinic commentary works. Like, the Talmud, if the Bible's difficult to read, you don't read the Talmud. Like, you have to read a commentary on all of this commentary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it is so much of guys, like, just 2 rabbis being like, I don't think Solomon actually wanted to kill all these like rabbis, whatever. And then, like, 50 years later, you get another entry. And it's like, you're both wrong. Here's the other interpretation. And they get wild. Like, they get way out there. And it's so much. I don't know. That's great. I'll definitely check out Huck Finn again. It's so
now that we brought it up, I would like to actually to close out the episode with one of my favorite passages from Huck Finn. This isn't like the first 2 pages, where Huck is being civilized by the widow and taught Bible stories every night. And just Huck's relationship to the story is so funny to me. It was one of my favorite just sentences in American literature. Mark Twain writes, after supper, she got out her book and learned me about Moses and the bulrushers. And I was in a real sweat to find out all about him. But by and by, she let it out that Moses had been dead a considerable long time. So then I didn't care no more about him because I didn't take no stock in dead people.
That is one of my favorite parts of Huckleberry Finn, genuinely. Yeah. It's so good.
Well, Hayden, I really want to thank you for hanging out with us today and teaching us about Moses and the bulrushers. And we did have some more Bible stories that we'd like to talk to you about, but we'd love to have you maybe come back on a future date and talk about the New Testament and Jesus Christ, because I did have something prepared on the parable of the prodigal son, which I think our listeners will find very edifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very relatable. Probably for a few different characters.
Just a little hint here. Prodigal, it does not mean prodigy. It does not mean child prodigy. And in fact, it means the exact opposite.
Yeah.
The prodigal son it is basically like the first instance of a guy going, you want me to get a job when the economy's this bad?
Exactly.
That's when that move was invented.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would be thrilled to come back on. There is so much more to talk about, and yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on this time. It's so much fun.
We can talk Revelation, and we can talk about the ongoing Red Heifer Watch. How many of them are currently out there? Will this be the one, though? Yeah. That's the question.
It's just it's always so tough. You know, you think it's going to be the one, and then like a year into it, you suddenly notice a little blemish, and you're like, nope, gotta do it again.
There are a lot of Ryan Leaf red heifers.
But like, I just love it that like in the current year 2026, there are people that are still trying to create the apocalypse cow. And you know
amazing.
What? It might work. It might fucking work.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very like something that I've kind of, as I've been reading all of this and learning so much more about it and doing so much research, I've realized that they're very good at like the Bible. Its legacy is almost entirely people manifesting its worst elements into like a tulpa of reality, like the apocalypse. Yes. Oh, okay, so Israel fucks up, and so like you see like Ezekiel's like don't pick Babylon. Jeremiah's like pick Babylon. Don't pick Egypt, man. And they pick Egypt, and they get their share. Like, and we've continued that trend of like just repeating those things, whether it's the apocalyptic stuff, whether it's like the dualistic Zoroastrianism that influences it and makes everything, black and white. It's all good versus evil. That, like, we talked about so much stuff today. Almost none of it was written in a period where that sort of like influence is even there. And it is so, like, I would love to come back on and talk, like we talked a lot about Iron Age stuff, but once the Persians and Greeks get involved, it completely changes the face of Judaism, and Christianity obviously emerges from there too. So there's so much more stuff, and it's
the Bible, his story continues.
That's right.
Hayden, I really want to thank you. That was really fun for hanging out. And everyone, please check out the Bible Lore podcast. We will have links in the show description.
I just want to come in and give the highest possible recommendation to the Bible Lore podcast. It's been one of my favorite history podcasts since it came out. Starts off immediately just fully formed, confident. Hayden is a great solo podcaster, but also brings in tons of expert guests. Weaves it in effortlessly with the narrative.
Yeah, you too. I brought in you as the local dirtbag expert.
Really, really solid history podcasting. If you're into history podcasts, the Bible Lore podcast, really love it.
Thanks so much, guys.
And also, of course, if you haven't already, go buy Chunks, a new comedy anthology from all of us here at Chapo Trap House and all of our wonderful friends over at patreon.com/chunkstv. Patreon.com/chunkstv.